Elena Vasquez sat in the massive examination hall of the Galactic Military Academy. The room was enormous, with rows of seats that stretched up toward a domed ceiling painted with stars from 1,000 different worlds. Around her sat beings from across the galaxy, each one preparing for the most important test of their military career. To her left, a tall Zeltharian with purple skin and 4 arms was reviewing tactical manuals on his datapad. His species was known for their precision in battle. They could calculate kill ratios faster than most computers. Elena had watched him during training exercises, and he never missed a target, never showed doubt, never hesitated to pull the trigger. On her right, a massive Korthak was sharpening his ceremonial blade. The Korthak were warriors who believed that honor came through complete victory. They had conquered 12 star systems in the last century. Their military academies taught that mercy was weakness, and weakness led to death. The Korthak beside her had scars covering his thick gray skin. Each scar told a story of battle, and each battle ended with his enemies dead. Behind Elena, a group of Sivari were clicking and whistling to each other in their native language. The Sivari looked like giant insects, with 6 legs and compound eyes. They were hive-minded, which made them excellent at coordinating massive military operations. When Sivari went to war, they moved like one giant organism. They never left enemies alive to regroup or seek revenge. Elena looked down at her own study materials. While her classmates reviewed weapon specifications and battle tactics, she had been reading about human history. Not the glorious battles or the famous victories, but the quiet moments when humans chose differently. She had read about Christmas truces in ancient wars, when enemies stopped fighting to share food and stories. She had studied generals who spared their enemies and turned them into allies. She had learned about soldiers who risked their lives to save civilians, even when those civilians belonged to the enemy. The other cadets found her study habits strange. During their 3 years at the academy, Elena had earned a reputation as an odd one. She was skilled in combat, that was true. Her marksmanship scores were among the highest in her class. She could pilot any spacecraft and plan complex military operations. But she asked too many questions that other cadets found pointless. "Why are we destroying that city?" she would ask during simulations. "Because it contains enemy forces," the instructor would reply. "But what about the civilians? Are there children in those buildings?" "Civilians are acceptable losses in war, Cadet Vasquez." Elena never felt comfortable with that answer, but she kept her thoughts to herself. She needed to graduate from the academy. Earth was still a new member of the galactic hegemony, and they needed officers in the galactic fleet. The future of humanity depended on humans proving they could be valuable members of the galactic community. The examination hall fell silent as Proctor Vexthan entered. He was a member of the Hegemony Council, one of the gray-skinned beings who had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. His species had no name that other races could pronounce, so everyone simply called them the Hegemony. They were old, powerful, and completely without emotion. Proctor Vexthan's black eyes scanned the room like a machine calculating the value of each student. "Cadets," his voice echoed through the hall without any warmth. "Today you face your final examination. This test will determine whether you are worthy to serve as officers in the galactic fleet. The subject is Galactic Morality in Warfare." Elena felt her heart beat faster. She had heard rumors about this exam. It was different from the others. Some said it was impossible to pass. Others claimed that it changed every cadet who took it. In the past year, only 30% of students had passed. Those who failed were sent home in shame, their military careers over before they began. "You will be placed in a combat simulation," Proctor Vexthan continued. "You will face a real military scenario that requires immediate action. You will have access to a full fleet of warships, ground forces, and specialized weapons. Your performance will be judged on effectiveness, efficiency, and adherence to galactic military doctrine." Elena noticed that he had not mentioned anything about mercy or protecting innocent lives. In the hegemony's view of morality, winning was the only virtue that mattered. The scenario is based on actual events, the proctor said. A species called the Yithrak has been conducting terrorist attacks against hegemony supply convoys. They have killed dozens of supply ship crew members and stolen medical supplies, food, and technological equipment. Intelligence reports indicate they are planning larger attacks. Your mission is to eliminate this threat permanently. Around the room, Elena could see her classmates nodding. This seemed like a straightforward problem to them. Find the enemies, destroy them, problem solved. The Zeltharian was already making notes about orbital bombardment strategies. The Korthak was grinning, probably thinking about hand-to-hand combat. The Sivari were clicking excitedly, planning coordinated strikes. But Elena felt uncomfortable. Something about the scenario bothered her, though she could not put her finger on what it was. Why would a species risk everything to steal medical supplies? Most terrorist groups wanted weapons or money. Medicine seemed like an odd choice for raiders who wanted to cause maximum damage. You will enter the neural link simulation chambers in 10 minutes, Proctor Vexthan announced. Remember, this is not just a test of your tactical abilities. This examination will reveal your true nature as a military officer. The galaxy will judge humanity by your performance today, Cadet Vasquez. His black eyes fixed on Elena for a moment, and she felt as though he could see into her soul. She wondered if he knew about her unusual study habits or if he had read her essays questioning certain military tactics. Perhaps the rumors were true, and this test was designed to weed out officers who might hesitate in battle. As the other cadets filed out toward the simulation chambers, Elena remained in her seat for a moment longer. She thought about her grandfather, who had fought in Earth's last great war before humanity joined the galactic community. He had been a soldier, but he had also been a man who believed that even enemies deserved basic dignity. He had told her stories about times when showing mercy had led to better outcomes than violence. The strongest weapon, he had said, is sometimes the one you choose not to use. Elena gathered her materials and followed her classmates toward the chambers. She had no idea that this test would change not just her life, but the future of the entire galaxy. She did not know that hidden observers were watching every cadet, looking for something that had been missing from galactic military leadership for centuries. All she knew was that in a few minutes, she would face a choice that would define who she truly was. The neural link simulation chambers lined the corridor like metal coffins. Each one was designed to connect directly to a cadet's brain, making the simulation feel completely real. Pain, fear, and adrenaline would all feel genuine. Many cadets had been traumatized by previous simulations, unable to forget the virtual deaths they had caused. Elena approached her assigned chamber and placed her hand on the scanner. The machine recognized her genetic pattern and opened with a soft hiss. She was about to discover that sometimes the most important battles are not fought with weapons but with conscience. Elena felt the cold metal of the neural interface touching the back of her neck. The world around her dissolved into bright light, and then she was standing on the bridge of a massive warship. The simulation was perfect. She could smell the recycled air, feel the vibration of the engines through the metal floor, and hear the quiet beeping of computer systems. Around the bridge, holographic crew members waited for her orders. They looked real, with detailed faces and uniforms. Elena knew they were just computer programs, but the simulation made them seem alive. A tactical officer turned to face her, saluting with crisp military precision. "Admiral Vasquez," the officer said, "we have located the Yithrak terrorist base. Our fleet is in position and ready to attack. Admiral." The simulation had promoted her to the highest rank. Elena looked out through the bridge's main viewing screen and saw a formation of 50 warships floating in space around her flagship. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a city. Together they could turn an entire planet into dust. "Show me the target," Elena commanded. The viewing screen changed to display a small planet with brown and green continents. It looked peaceful from space, but Elena could see red dots marking Yithrak settlements scattered across the surface. According to the tactical display, over 10 million Yithrak lived on this world. Intelligence reports indicate the terrorists are using civilian settlements as cover, the tactical officer explained. Our orbital bombardment will eliminate all possible hiding places. Elena studied the display more carefully. Something felt wrong about this setup. The Yithrak settlements were not built like military bases. They looked like farms and small towns. There were no defensive weapons visible, no military installations, no signs of the advanced technology needed to build the ships that had been attacking supply convoys. On her communication system, Elena could monitor the other cadets, taking the same exam. Their voices filled the bridge as they coordinated their attacks. Zeltharian Battlegroup Alpha, beginning orbital bombardment in 30 seconds, came the voice of her purple-skinned classmate. Elena could see his ships on long-range sensors, already charging their main weapons. Korthak ground forces preparing for planetary assault, announced her warrior classmate. We will show no mercy to these terrorists. Sivari Hive Fleet moving to surround the planet, clicked the insect-like voices of the group mind. No escape routes will remain open. Elena realized that all her classmates were preparing to destroy the Yithrak homeworld completely. They saw this as a simple problem with a simple solution. Kill all the terrorists and the terrorist attacks would stop forever. But Elena could not stop thinking about those 10 million Yithrak civilians. The briefing had mentioned terrorist attacks, but it had not explained why the Yithrak were attacking. Supply convoys. What drove an entire species to risk everything in desperate raids against the most powerful military force in the galaxy? Admiral, her tactical officer said impatiently, your fleet is ready to fire. Shall we begin the bombardment? Instead of answering, Elena opened a communication channel. This is Admiral Vasquez to all fleet units. Hold your positions. Do not fire without my direct order. The tactical officer looked confused. Admiral, the other battle groups are already attacking. If we delay, the terrorists might escape. Elena ignored him and opened a scanning channel instead. Full sensor sweep of the planet. I want detailed information about those settlements. Look for military installations, weapons factories, anything that suggests organized resistance. While her sensors worked, Elena watched the tactical display, showing her classmates' attacks. The Zeltharian ships fired bright beams of energy that struck the planet's surface like falling stars. Where they hit, massive explosions bloomed, leaving smoking craters where Yithrak towns had been moments before. The Korthak had landed their ground forces and were advancing across the continents with their characteristic brutal efficiency. Elena could see the progress markers on her display as they burned their way through settlement after settlement. The Sivari had surrounded the planet with a net of ships, making sure no Yithrak could escape to space. Their coordination was perfect, like watching a single mind controlling hundreds of bodies. Admiral, her communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from the planet. It's on an emergency frequency. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. Put it through. The viewing screen flickered and suddenly Elena was looking at a Yithrak. The alien was small and thin, with gray skin and large dark eyes. It looked almost like a human child, except for the small ridges along its skull. The Yithrak was clearly terrified and Elena could hear explosions in the background. Please, the Yithrak said in broken galactic standard language. Please stop. We are not soldiers. We are not terrorists. We are dying. Our children are dying. Please help us. The transmission cut off as another explosion rocked the area where the signal had originated. Elena stared at the blank screen, feeling sick. Around her, the bridge crew waited for orders, but she found herself unable to speak. Her sensor officer finally reported his findings. Admiral, the surface scans are complete. We found no military installations, no weapons factories, and no signs of organized resistance. The settlements appear to be agricultural communities and small towns. Population scans indicate that 60% of the inhabitants are juveniles. Children. Most of the Yithrak on the planet were children. Elena opened her communication system again and listened to her classmates coordinating their attacks. They were talking about kill counts and efficiency ratings. They discussed which weapons caused the most damage and which tactics eliminated targets most quickly. None of them seemed to have any doubt about what they were doing. Admiral Vasquez, came Proctor Vexithon's voice over a special command channel. Your battle group has not engaged the enemy. You are failing to complete your mission. Elena looked at the tactical display. Her classmates had already destroyed dozens of Yithrak settlements. Millions of the aliens were dead or dying. The planet's surface was covered with fires and smoke. Soon there would be nothing left alive on the world below, but Elena could not bring herself to fire on a planet full of children and farmers. Instead, she did something that stunned everyone watching the simulation. She opened a general communication channel and broadcast on all frequencies used by the Yithrak. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Galactic Fleet, she said. I am requesting immediate ceasefire and negotiation talks. I repeat, I want to talk, not fight. Her bridge crew stared at her in shock. The voices of her classmates fell silent on the communication channels. Somewhere in the real world, Elena knew that Proctor Vexthon and the other observers were probably marking her examination as a failure. But Elena did not care about grades anymore. She had seen the fear in that Yithrak's eyes, and she had heard the desperation in its voice. Whatever was happening here, it was not simple terrorism. There was something else going on, something that none of her classmates had bothered to investigate. Elena was about to discover that the most important skill for any military officer was not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to understand when destruction was not the answer. The communication system crackled with static, and then a new voice came through. It was another Yithrak, but this one sounded older and calmer than the first. Admiral Vasquez, the alien said, My name is Keeper Threndal. I speak for those who remain alive on our world. You say you wish to talk. Why should we trust the words of those who kill our children? Helena looked at the tactical display where the attacks by her classmates continued. More Yithrak settlements disappeared from the sensors every minute. Soon there might be no one left to talk to. Because, Elena said, I think there's something about this situation that we don't understand. And I think the only way to truly solve this problem is to understand it first. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she worked at the communication console. Around her, the bridge crew watched with confusion and growing concern. No one in the simulation had ever seen a fleet admiral try to talk to terrorists instead of destroying them. Keeper Threndal, Elena said into the communication channel. I need you to tell me why your people have been attacking our supply ships. Help me understand what's happening. The Yithrak's voice came back after a long pause. Elena could hear explosions and screaming in the background as her classmates continued their attacks on other parts of the planet. Admiral, Keeper Threndal said, your people came to our world 5 years ago. They said they needed to mine the crystals from our mountains for your great machines. We said yes because we wanted to be friends with the galaxy. We thought joining your hegemony would bring us knowledge and prosperity. Elena listened carefully. This part of the story had not been included in their mission briefing. The briefing had only mentioned terrorist attacks, not mining operations or diplomatic contact. The mining began, the keeper continued. And at first everything seemed normal. Your people paid us fairly for the mining rights. They hired our workers and treated them with respect. But then something went wrong with the mining equipment. There was an accident and poisonous chemicals leaked into our water supply. Elena felt a cold chill run down her spine. What kind of chemicals? We do not know their names in your language. Our scientists called them the Gray Death. The poison spread through our rivers and into our soil. Our crops began to fail. Our children began to get sick. We asked your mining company for help, but they said the chemicals were safe. They said our people were just not used to modern technology. The tactical officer standing next to Elena shifted uncomfortably. Admiral, this conversation is not relevant to our mission. We should focus on eliminating the terrorist threat. But Elena ignored him and kept listening to the keeper's story. More of our children got sick, Threndal continued. They developed painful sores on their skin. They could not eat without vomiting. They grew weak and could not play or learn. We sent messages to your government asking for medical help. We sent scientists with samples of the poison. We begged your people to help us save our young ones. Elena checked her computer files for any record of Yithrak diplomatic requests. She found dozens of messages sent to various hegemony departments over the past 3 years. Each message had been filed away and forgotten. No one had ever responded to the Yithrak pleas for help. "No one answered our messages," the keeper said, confirming Elena's discovery. "Your mining company told us that helping sick Yithrak was not their responsibility. Your government offices said they were too busy with more important matters. Our children kept dying and no one in your great galactic civilization seemed to care." Elena's communication officer suddenly announced, "Admiral, we're receiving priority messages from the other battle groups. They want to know why we haven't joined the attack." Elena could see on her tactical display that her classmates were making rapid progress. The Zeltharian ships had destroyed most of the northern continent's settlements. The Korthak ground forces had captured the southern cities and were executing any Yithrak they found. The Sivari fleet had tightened their blockade, making sure no refugees could escape into space. "Continue, Keeper Threndal," Elena said. "Tell me about the supply ship attacks." "When no one would help us through official channels, some of our people grew desperate. They formed small groups and began raiding your supply convoys looking for medicine that might save our children. They were not trained soldiers, Admiral. They were doctors and teachers and parents who could not watch their young ones die without trying anything to help them." Elena accessed the tactical records of the supply ship attacks that had prompted this military response. As she read through the reports, she noticed something interesting. The Yithrak raiders had only taken medical supplies, food, and basic technology. They had never stolen weapons, military equipment, or valuable trade goods. Most importantly, they had gone out of their way to avoid killing the crew members of the ships they raided. "Your people have been very careful not to kill our crews," Elena observed. "We do not want to hurt anyone," the keeper replied. "We only wanted medicine for our children. Every Yithrak who participated in the raids volunteered, knowing they might die. But they also knew that doing nothing meant watching their own families suffer." Elena felt a heavy weight settling in her chest. The terrorists her classmates were busy exterminating were actually desperate parents trying to save their dying children. The great military threat that required a fleet of warships to eliminate was nothing more than a medical crisis that had been ignored by the galactic government. Her communications officer spoke up again. "Admiral, Proctor Vexthon is demanding an immediate status report. He wants to know why we have not fired a single shot." Elena knew that her military career was probably over. Every minute she spent talking instead of shooting was another mark against her in the examination. But she also knew that she could not live with herself if she killed millions of innocent people without at least trying to find a better solution. "Keeper Threndal," Elena said, "how many of your children are still alive?" "Perhaps 2 million on this world," came the sad reply. "But they grow sicker every day. Even if your attack ends now, most will be dead within a year unless we can find a cure for the poison." Elena made a decision that would change everything. Instead of attacking, she opened a communication channel to her fleet's medical ships. "This is Admiral Vasquez to all fleet medical personnel. I need immediate consultation on treating chemical poisoning in Yithrak physiology. We have a potential medical emergency on the planet below." Her tactical officer stared at her in shock. "Admiral, we are here to destroy the enemy, not provide medical assistance." "Maybe," Elena said quietly. "We're here to find out what the right thing to do actually is." Elena accessed her fleet's medical databases and began researching Yithrak biology. She also started reviewing the mining company's safety records and chemical usage reports. What she found made her angry. The mining operation had been using industrial solvents that were known to be toxic to several alien species. The company had never bothered to test whether the chemicals were safe for Yithrak biology. Even worse, Elena discovered that the hegemony military had effective treatments for the exact type of poisoning that was killing Yithrak children. The medicine existed, was readily available, and would cost almost nothing to distribute. The only reason the Yithrak were dying was because no one with authority had bothered to investigate their requests for help. Elena opened the communication channel again. "Keeper Threndal, I believe we can help your people. My medical staff thinks they can treat the chemical poisoning, but I need you to do something for me." "What do you ask, Admiral?" "I need you to call back all the Yithrak who are raiding supply ships. Have them return to your homeworld immediately. If you do this, I will make sure your children receive the medical treatment they need." There was a long pause. Elena could hear the keeper discussing her proposal with other Yithrak in the background. Finally, his voice came back over the communication system. "Admiral Vasquez, forgive me, but how do we know you will keep your promise? Your people have broken their word to us before." Elena looked around at her bridge crew, who were all staring at her as if she had lost her mind. She thought about her classmates who were still busy destroying Yithrak cities and counting their kills. She thought about Proctor Vexthan, who was probably preparing to fail her examination. But she also thought about her grandfather's words about the strongest weapon being the one you choose not to use. "Because," Elena said, "I give you my word as a human being. And I promise you that humans keep their promises, especially when children's lives are at stake." 3 hours later, Elena stood on the bridge watching something that no one had expected. Yithrak ships were returning from across the galaxy, small vessels that had been conducting raids on supply convoys. One by one, they appeared on the long-range sensors and headed toward their homeworld. Elena's medical ships had already begun distributing treatment to the Yithrak settlements that had survived her classmates' attacks. The poison that had been killing Yithrak children was indeed treatable with standard hegemony medical supplies. Within hours of receiving the medicine, dying Yithrak children were beginning to recover. But Elena knew that her success would not matter to the examination board. She had failed to eliminate the terrorist threat as ordered. Instead, she had negotiated with enemies and provided them with aid. By every measure that the Galactic Military Academy used to judge officers, she had performed poorly. Her communication system crackled with messages from her classmates who had completed their missions and were preparing to return to the academy. "Zeltharian Battle Group Alpha reporting mission accomplished," came the voice of her purple-skinned classmate. "All terrorist settlements eliminated. Estimated enemy casualties, 4 million. No survivors detected." "Korthak ground forces reporting total victory," announced the warrior student. "All enemy combatants destroyed. Planet secured for hegemony colonization." "Siviri Hive Fleet confirming complete success," clicked the insect voices. "No enemy vessels escaped. Threat permanently neutralized." Elena listened to these reports with a heavy heart. Her classmates had killed millions of desperate parents and sick children, and they were proud of their efficiency. They had solved the Yithrak problem by making sure no Yithrak remained alive to cause problems. Her tactical officer approached with a concerned expression. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority message from Proctor Vexthan. He's requesting your immediate return to the academy for debriefing." Elena nodded. She had expected this. The simulation was ending, and she would have to face the consequences of her choices. She looked one last time at the tactical display, where her medical ships continued their work saving Yithrak lives. "Very well," she said. "Signal all fleet units to prepare for return to base." The simulation began to dissolve around her. The bridge faded away, the stars disappeared, and Elena felt the cold touch of the neural interface disconnecting from her mind. She was back in the metal chamber at the academy, feeling disoriented and emotionally drained. Elena climbed out of the simulation chamber and walked slowly toward the debriefing room. In the corridor, she passed her classmates who were celebrating their successful missions. The Zeltharian was discussing his precise targeting algorithms with an instructor. The Korthak was showing off recordings of his ground battles. The Sivari were clicking happily about their coordination efficiency. When they saw Elena, their conversations quieted. Word had spread quickly about her unusual approach to the examination. "I heard you tried to talk to the terrorists," the Zeltharian said with obvious disdain. "How very human of you." The Korthak laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "Mercy is weakness, human. Your species will never understand true warfare." The Sivari clicked in what Elena recognized as their equivalent of laughter. "The human thinks enemies can become friends. How primitive." Elena ignored their comments and continued toward the debriefing room. She had expected their mockery. In the 3 years they had studied together, Her classmates had never understood why humans approached conflict differently than other species. The debriefing room was small and sterile, with white walls and a single table. Proctor Vexthan was waiting for her, his black eyes expressionless as always. He gestured for Elena to sit across from him. "Cadet Vasquez," he said in his emotionless voice. "Your performance in the examination was highly unusual." "Yes, sir," Elena replied. "I realize that my approach was not what you expected. You failed to eliminate the enemy threat as ordered. You provided aid and comfort to known terrorists. You allowed enemy combatants to escape. By every measure of military effectiveness, your performance was inadequate." Elena felt her heart sinking. She had known this would happen, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. "I understand, sir." Proctor Vexthan made some notes on his data pad. "However," he continued, "there are some unusual circumstances regarding your examination that require further discussion." Before Elena could ask what he meant, the door to the debriefing room opened. To Elena's shock, a group of beings entered that she had never seen before. They were not Academy instructors or hegemony officials. Instead, they appeared to be representatives from dozens of different species, many of whom Elena did not recognize. One of them stepped forward. Elena was surprised to see that it was a Yithrak, but not one from the simulation. This was a real Yithrak with the same gray skin and large dark eyes, but wearing elaborate robes that suggested high rank or status. Admiral Vasquez, the Yithrak, said, speaking perfect galactic standard, "My name is High Keeper Velthari. I represent the Yithrak delegation to the Galactic Council." Elena stared in confusion. "I don't understand. The simulation is over. Why are you here?" Another being stepped forward, this one from a species Elena had never encountered. It had golden skin and 4 arms with intricate patterns tattooed across its face. "The simulation was not entirely a simulation," the golden being explained. "I am Counselor Zethron of the Altarian Republic. What you experienced was a real scenario with real consequences." Elena felt the world spinning around her. "Real? But that means—" "The Yithrak homeworld exists," Highkeeper Velthari confirmed. "Our children were dying from industrial poisoning. Your classmates' attacks in the simulation were based on actual battle plans that were being considered by the Hegemony Military Command." Proctor Vexthan finally showed emotion, though it was only a slight tilting of his head. "The examination was designed to identify military officers who could think beyond standard doctrine. Every cadet who has taken this test in the past year has chosen the same solution: complete elimination of the perceived threat." A third being stepped forward, this one tall and thin with blue skin. "I am Ambassador Krindal of the Aquatic Confederacy. We have been observing these examinations across the galaxy, searching for military officers who possess a quality that has become rare in galactic civilization." "What quality?" Elena asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. "Wisdom," Ambassador Krindal replied. "The ability to see beyond immediate military objectives and consider the deeper consequences of actions. The capacity to choose diplomacy over destruction when diplomacy can achieve better results." Highkeeper Velthari approached Elena's chair. "In all the examinations conducted across hundreds of worlds, with thousands of cadets from dozens of species, you are the first to choose negotiation over elimination. You are the first to ask why the attacks were happening instead of simply stopping them through force." Elena looked around the room at all the alien faces watching her. "But I failed the examination. I didn't complete the mission as ordered." Counselor Zethron made a sound that might have been laughter. "Child, the mission was never to eliminate the Yithrak. The real mission was to identify officers who could lead the galaxy beyond its current path of conquest and domination. The Galactic Council has been secretly searching for individuals who could command a new type of military organization," Ambassador Krindal explained. "Not a force for conquest, but a force for peace. Not an army that destroys problems, but one that solves them." Elena felt overwhelmed by the implications of what she was hearing. "You mean this was all a test to find people like me?" Highkeeper Velthari nodded. And thanks to your choices, the real Yithrak children who were dying from industrial poisoning are now receiving medical treatment. Your mercy in a simulation saved actual lives in the real galaxy. Proctor Vexthon stood up from his chair. Cadet Vasquez, you have not failed this examination. Instead, you have passed a test that no other being in the galaxy has been able to pass. Elena looked at all the faces around her, representing species from across the galaxy who had been watching and hoping for someone who could offer an alternative to endless warfare. What happens now? She asked. Counselor Zethron smiled, an expression that looked strange on his golden features. Now, Admiral Vasquez, we offer you the opportunity to build something that the galaxy has never seen before, a military force dedicated to protecting life rather than destroying it. For the first time since entering the examination room, Elena smiled. Maybe her grandfather had been right about the strongest weapon being the one you choose not to use. 6 months later, Elena stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed starship Harmony, watching as representatives from 47 different species arrived for the first meeting of the Galactic Peace Corps. The ship itself was unlike any military vessel ever built. Instead of weapons, it carried medical facilities, diplomatic meeting rooms, and research laboratories. Instead of being designed for destruction, every part of the ship was built for communication, understanding, and healing. Elena wore a uniform that was different from the traditional hegemony military design. Where the old uniforms had sharp angles and intimidating symbols, the Peace Corps uniforms were designed to appear approachable and non-threatening. The insignia on Elena's collar showed not a weapon or a predator, but a simple design of hands, reaching toward each other across the stars. High Keeper Velthari approached her at the observation deck. In the months since the examination, Elena had learned that the Yithrak were not the primitive species they had appeared to be in the simulation. They were actually accomplished scientists and philosophers, with a deep understanding of biotechnology and peaceful conflict resolution. Admiral, Velthari said, the delegates are ready for your opening address. Elena nodded, but remained at the viewing window for a moment longer. Among the arriving ships, she could see vessels from species that had been at war with each other for centuries. The Kralian Empire and the Thexian Republic had agreed to a ceasefire just to attend this meeting. The warlike Vorthak clans had sent their first diplomatic mission in over 1,000 years. Keeper Velthari, Elena said, do you really think this will work? Can we actually change the way the galaxy handles conflict? The Yithrak's large, dark eyes reflected the starlight from the viewing window. 6 months ago, a human cadet chose to save the lives of children she had never met, from a species she barely knew about during what she thought was only a simulation. If that kind of compassion is possible, then yes, I believe change is possible. Elena walked with Velthari toward the main conference hall. Along the way, they passed through sections of the ship that would have seemed impossible to the old Elena who had sat in the Academy examination hall. There was a medical bay where Yithrak doctors worked alongside human physicians to develop new treatments. There was a research laboratory where former enemies collaborated on projects that would benefit all species. There was even a school where the children of different species learned together. The conference hall was filled with beings that Elena had only read about in textbooks. Some were old allies of humanity, but many were from species that had been neutral or even hostile to the hegemony. They were all here because word had spread throughout the galaxy about the human admiral, who had chosen mercy over victory. As Elena walked to the podium, she saw her former classmates in the audience. The Zeltharian sat with other military officers, his purple face showing curiosity rather than the disdain she remembered. The Korthak warrior was present as well, though Elena noticed he had removed most of his ceremonial weapons. Even the Sivari delegation had sent representatives, their compound eyes watching Elena with what might have been interest. Elena reached the podium and looked out at the assembled delegates. She had been preparing this speech for months, but now that the moment had arrived, she decided to speak from her heart instead of from her notes. 6 months ago, Elena began, I took an examination that was supposed to test my understanding of galactic morality and warfare. I thought the test was about finding the most efficient way to eliminate an enemy. I was wrong. The audience listened, in complete silence. Elena could see that many of them were leaning forward, eager to hear what the human had to say. The real test was about something much more important. It was about whether we could imagine a better way to solve problems than simply destroying anyone who causes them. It was about whether we could choose to understand our enemies instead of eliminating them. Elena gestured toward the viewing windows, where the stars of the galaxy stretched out in all directions. For thousands of years, our species have conquered and killed and dominated each other. We have treated war as the natural state of the galaxy, and peace as just a temporary pause between conflicts. But what if we were wrong? What if there is another way? She paused and looked directly at her former classmates. I used to think that military strength meant being willing to destroy your enemies completely. But I learned something important during that examination. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose not to fight. Sometimes the greatest victory is the one where everyone gets to go home alive. From the audience came a voice Elena recognized. It was her former classmate, the Zeltharian officer. "Admiral," he said, standing up formally, "my species has conquered 12 star systems through military might. We are efficient warriors, but our conquered worlds are filled with people who hate us and constantly rebel against our rule. What you did in the simulation, would it really work in real military situations?" Elena smiled. This was the question she had been hoping someone would ask. "Commander Zethval," she replied, recognizing his name. "What if instead of conquering those 12 star systems, your people had offered them partnership? What if instead of ruling through fear, you had built relationships through cooperation? Do you think those worlds would be rebelling today?" The Zeltharian considered this for a long moment. "Perhaps not," he admitted. "But that approach would take longer and require more resources than simple conquest." "In the short term, yes," Elena agreed. "But in the long term, which approach actually costs more? The energy spent constantly fighting rebellions or the energy spent building lasting partnerships?" Another voice came from the audience. This time it was the Korthak warrior. "Admiral, my people believe that honor comes through victory in battle. How do we find honor in avoiding conflict?" Elena had been expecting this question too. "Commander Thorkmal, is there more honor in defeating a weak enemy or in making a weak enemy strong enough to become your ally? Is there more courage in destroying someone who cannot fight back, or in choosing mercy when you have the power to destroy?" The Korthak was quiet for several minutes, and Elena could see that he was struggling with concepts that challenged everything his culture had taught him. Finally, he spoke again. "I have not considered these possibilities before." From the back of the room, the Sivari delegation began their distinctive clicking sounds. Elena had learned enough of their language to understand that they were discussing her words among themselves. One of them spoke up in Galactic Standard. "The human suggests cooperation between species. But the Sivari mind is unified. We do not understand how individual thinkers can work together effectively." Elena nodded respectfully. "The Sivari hive mind is remarkably efficient at coordination. But imagine what could be accomplished if your unified thinking could coordinate, not just with other Sivari, but with the diverse perspectives of dozens of different species. Your efficiency combined with Korthak strength, Zeltharian precision, human adaptability, and Yithrak wisdom could solve problems that none of our species could handle alone." As Elena spoke, she could see changes happening in the faces around her. Beings who had entered the conference hall as representatives of competing species were beginning to look at each other not as potential enemies, but as potential partners. High Keeper Velthari stood up from his seat. "Admiral Vasquez speaks truth. When the Yithrak children were dying from industrial poisoning, our species alone could not save them. It required human compassion to recognize our need, human medical knowledge to understand the problem, and human diplomatic skill to convince others to help. No species, no matter how advanced, is strong enough to face the challenges of the galaxy alone." Elena looked around the room one more time before continuing her speech. "The Galactic Peace Corps is not about avoiding conflict," she said. "Sometimes, conflict is necessary to protect innocent lives or defend important principles. But the Peace Corps is about making sure that when we do fight, We're fighting for the right reasons and in the right way. We're about making sure that our victories create lasting solutions, not just temporary quiet. She gestured toward a wall display that showed the current state of the galaxy, with red zones marking areas of active warfare and orange zones showing regions of tension and potential conflict. Right now, 30% of the galaxy is involved in active warfare. Another 40% is preparing for war or recovering from recent conflicts. That means only 30% of our galactic civilization is actually able to focus on progress, discovery, and growth. What could we accomplish if those numbers were reversed? The audience murmured as they considered the implications. Elena could see that she had their attention. The Peace Corps is not about forcing peace on unwilling species, Elena continued. It's about offering an alternative. When conflicts arise, instead of sending armies to pick a winner, we send negotiators to find solutions. Instead of selling weapons to both sides, we offer medical aid and disaster relief. Instead of conquering territory, we build schools and hospitals and research stations. Elena paused and looked directly at her former classmates again.